the evening sky. To whom do these celestial steeds belong? When you appear to us like gods on high, what brings you here to mystify?
Hi, and welcome to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. With us today are longtime investigators and researchers, Kathleen Marden and Denise Stoner. Kathleen Marden, of course, is very community as the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, the first really publication. So welcome to the show, Kathleen.
Thank you. It's great to be with you again.
All right. And Stoner has personal experiences, and she share all that with us today. So, Denise, welcome to the show as well.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. About a year ago, I did that there be a study done on abductions, see was some, as they said, commonality. And as a result, they've published this really phenomenal paper, the Marden Stoner Study on Commonalities Among Abduction Experiencers. So you both have a great deal of experience with abductions in this topic. Is that what led you to do this study?
It is. What we wanted to do, actually, is to do a quantitative analysis on commonalities among abduction experiencers. Denise and I had been talking about this sometime, and what the driving point was that so much of it is reported, but it isn't quantified. It's not been quantified. And when something is simply given as sentences, that do with the stuff.
I know the last I saw you told me you were just about with this. I had no idea. But how participants, was that difficult at all? This can be a very sensitive.
Began and about the beginning of this?
Really came about of the private abductees I hold, and Kathleen has become involved in those. And while we were sitting there, come up with a few questions that became incorporated into this questionnaire. And from there, to develop the whole thing, Kathleen came up with some of the, and I was, I guess the ones regarding abductees and how they took place, what the people thought, and we kind of tested at the private meeting. And then from there, developed the whole thing, and Kathleen put it out on our website. We passed them on. Abductees contacted us and went from there.
We also wrote an article that appeared in the MUFON Journal. Mm-hmm. We spoke about this on radio show interviews that we did, and also posted on several different websites.
How did you now, I know that as a troll, you also asked the sins unabducted. How did you find those people? I sometimes in the private, or let me say the non-UFO sector, people really don't want to know about abductions. They're a little bit frightened by it. How did you find people on that side to participate?
Actually, I thought that it was a little bit easier, and people were more willing to respond. In a very short time, we had 25 people, and this only started after we had noticed trends among the abduction experiencers who had responded to these questionnaires. So I developed fairly general questions. Some of them were the same, but some of them obviously couldn't be worded in the same way because these people hadn't been abducted. But I looked for people, and Denise also looked for people in the community, also people who attended her UFO groups, not abduction experiencers, but people who were there for their general interest in the topic. And also we advertised on radio programs, again, during our interviews.
All right. Well, if there's someone out there listening who would like to get in touch, are you still doing this research? Are you following up on it, or is it sort of closed at this time?
Well, at this time, we've already collated all of the results and done the statistical analysis. Mm-hmm. It's posted on my website. So if anyone were to participate in this, we wouldn't know for sure at this point if their response had been determined by the responses of others. So it could possibly skew the results.
Oh, okay.
So on this first section of our study, it has been completed. Yet there are others who now want to take the questionnaire. So they could contact either Denise or myself at our email addresses.
And what is...
and mine is the letter K, Marden, M-A-R-D-E-N, at AOL.com. And Denise, why don't you give yours?
Yes. Mine is DeniseMStoner.com. Very easy.
Okay.
Email address?
And my email address is dmstoner1@gmail.com.
Well,
we have a second part to this study, and it's posted on my website. It is for those who are experiencers, who are familiar with ET technology, and who can describe exactly what they observed on the craft. If they observed symbols, what ET groups they actually worked with, what process they went through. And so very, very few people are actually able to answer this questionnaire, and we're still looking for people who can do this, and it's posted on my website at Kathleen-Marden.com.
Okay. Well,
yeah, this is very important to us because we have received very few, and those that we have received, there are some commonalities there that are quite fascinating.
Yes, that would be. And, you know, Dave Jacobs has always said they are the scouts, the abductees. They are the ones that go out and bring the information back. But what really interested me, as far as your study went, you actually did find commonalities. These were not, the answers to these questionnaire were not all over the map. They indeed fell into categories. So if it's okay with you, I'll just go down your study and take it topic by topic. And the first was demographics. And you found something interesting, that there were twice as many women as men that completed the questionnaire. And do you think that had to do with abductions, or just simply women versus men taking questionnaires?
Well, that was a good question in the beginning until we went to the control group. And we found out that although 36% of the men who were experiencers answered, 64% of the control group were men.
Wow.
So it does lead us to believe that more women have probably had an abduction experience than men.
Wow. Well, see, now that's interesting, and at least you have a basis for that. You're not just thinking that maybe it's true. I really like your approach to studying this, and I think it should carry over into ufology as well. I mean, I think it's high time that this was quantified, as you said. The other thing, too, is you started to look into age groups as well. And,
yes, we did, and found that quite fascinating. If you see in front of you the various age groups, we found that the baby boomers, that group in particular, has a high percentage of who had been taken and who the abductees are there. Of course, it goes back through their family line the majority of the time, but right now the baby boomers are up front as far as being abductees.
Yeah. Oops. That always gets a little nerve-wracking, but okay. And then also, as far as now, what made you pick things like area of residence, rural versus small town versus suburban or urban? What were your thoughts behind those topics? Just to sort of put things in a little bit better perspective, or had you really felt that that was important?
I thought that it was very important. It was, to me, it was curiosity on my part, because looking back through the sociological studies that have been done, dating back to 1971, some of those studies were looking at the areas of residence of the people who, for example, observed UFOs. And back then there was a trend toward the observation of UFOs by more people who lived in a rural area. And so I wondered if more UFOs were observed among people who resided in a rural area, if perhaps there were more abductions in a rural area as well. And I knew that, of course, Bud Hopkins had written about abductions occurring in New York City. So I wanted to know the percentages, how many were happening, for example, in rural areas as opposed to urban areas. So that was the reason for my asking that question. And we discovered that it was fairly well balanced.
Yeah. And that was a little bit of a surprise, too. Somehow or other, when people talk about abductions, you always think of the dark country road when you're all alone. But in fact, it can happen almost anywhere. And that was a surprising statistic that you compiled.
Yes.
It was surprising to me, anyway. And the other thing with demographics, too, was the amount of abductions, the number of times that people were abducted. And it seems like really for the most, in the most cases, certainly a lot more than one time.
Yes, it appears to be that way. Once they begin, and at a fairly young age for many people, it continues on. And the reason for the abductions appear to change as they age. We've discovered that has happened. So, as you can see, looking at the numbers, that the whole thing is very fascinating, and it just leads us to ask more and more questions. And we will probably do that following this questionnaire. You just come up with more questions.
Great. Well, I hope you do. We're just going to take a quick break. Kate Valentine here, and I'm speaking to Kathleen Marden and Denise Stoner. They are the co-authors of the Marden Stoner study on commonalities among abduction experiencers. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back, but if you have questions or if you've had an experience you would like to relate, post it right now on our website, AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. For further information after the show, you can go to Kathleen Marden's website, Kathleen with a K, -Marden.com. Right back. Hi, welcome back to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. Our guests today are Denise Stoner and Kathleen Marden. They are the co-authors of a critical analysis of the abduction experience, the Marden Stoner study on commonalities among abduction experiencers. If you have a question or comment, if you'd like to relate an experience, you can post it now on our website, AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. And Kathleen, Denise, after the show, if they'd like to find out more, what would be the best address for them to go to?
Well, I think that they could go to either of our websites. The study is posted on both websites.
Okay.
And mine is Kathleen with a K -Marden.com. Or they can write to me at the letter K, Marden, MARDEN, at AOL.com. And Denise, why don't you give yours?
Okay. My email is dmstoner1@gmail.com, and my website is denisemstoner.com.
Well, thank you both. Now we get to the part that I like the best, or I found the most interesting, let me put it that way, and that was the abduction memories. The thing that just snapped out at me was that 88% stated that their abduction memories were consciously recalled. And again, you know, the popular conception is that this is all through hypnotic recall, and in fact it is not. And did you found that very consistent, didn't you?
Yes, we did, and that was a real surprise to us as well, because we had fed into the idea that people were recalling this either through flashbacks or through hypnosis, when actually only 38% stated that it was recalled through hypnosis, whereas 88% recalled it consciously, and only 16% recalled it through other means such as flashbacks. And so this was very interesting to us.
Yes, it was quite fascinating, and even though there are 56% that had episodes through dreams, and they had some blank spaces, they still had some conscious recall, and they needed to fill in some of those blanks. It's been quite fascinating to find out that they had this conscious recall, and so much of it.
Well, certainly, Kathleen, your uncle and aunt had a conscious recall to some extent, and then the rest of the experience was brought out through hypnosis. But it started because of the reason they went through hypnotic regression was because of a conscious memory that something had happened to them.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. The only thing that they didn't remember consciously was the abduction experience itself. They eventually remembered men standing in the road, non-humans, who took them onto this craft. But it was after they were actually abducted that their memory ceased to exist and then was brought out through hypnosis.
Yeah, and then again you go on to state that almost half of the witnesses reported the observation of a UFO near their house prior to or during their abduction, and my goodness, almost 2/3 said that they were aware of having been examined on an alien craft. So this actually points to the extraterrestrial hypothesis that there are alien beings that are traveling in craft, and they do take humans aboard these craft. That is really the definition that you've come to with abductions.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow, this is Kate Valentine. I'm speaking to Kathleen Marden and Denise Stoner on 1160 WVNJ. That is that's a phenomenal conclusion. I mean, most people just go, oh, no, there are no such thing as UFOs, or certainly there's no such thing as abductions. And here you've almost demonstrated that indeed there are abductions, and indeed it is through alien beings on craft, not on some ethereal type of experience. This is a real nuts and bolts experience.
That's true. And to find out that these crafts were observed prior to their abductions, either themselves or neighbors or others that reported these sightings prior to them being taken, it was fascinating to us.
And now, Denise, I believe that you have had a personal experience with abductions. Is that correct?
I have had. I don't describe it wholly and totally, but I have some conscious memory. I have been working with someone, and I don't want it to interfere with our research and with what I'm doing. At some point, a lot of it might be disclosed, but I took this survey,
okay,
and some of my experiences are included in it. So I'm a part and partial to these percentages.
And you would agree with the majority of responses to this survey, too, then?
Absolutely,
wow.
Yes.
Wow, that's really... Then we come to the other sort of really very important topic of emotional responses. And what sort of startled me was that certainly fear was described, and that's understandable, but that curiosity was equivalent to fear. And that's sort of I was surprised. I mean, I would have thought the overwhelming emotional response would have been fear and not curiosity.
What I found when I had discussions with the individuals who participated in the study is that most of them said that initially they were very fearful, and that was the predominant emotion, but that over time and over the years as they were taken repeatedly, they grew to gain a greater understanding of what was happening to them and became less fearful. And then that is when they had the opportunity to become curious.
But then there's also some feelings of despair. What was that all about? Was it that they just sort of, you hear these stories where they're shown pictures of the planet destroying itself, and they're here to give us warnings of a coming apocalypse. Is that what the despair was, or were they just so overwhelmed by fear that they sort of lost track of their everyday life?
Well, what was voiced to me primarily was that despair because there was nothing that they could do about this. It was interfering with their life, and also despair because they were having these experiences and no one took them seriously.
Yeah, that has a great deal to do with it. A loss of control, almost a knowing that this was going to occur. When it was going to occur, they had some warning ahead of time, a sense that it was going to happen. So that gave them this feeling, and then the complete lack of fear once they were aboard the craft.
Yeah. Well, we had a question that came in from Dale that either one, Kathleen or Denise, could answer. Dale said, I have heard many scientists state that there is life on other planets, but they would never find us, and they have no reason to visit us. Could you reply to that hypothesis? Do you think that there are alien beings? Do you think they are visiting us here for some reason?
I speak with a number of theoretical physicists.
Okay.
And who have been hypothesizing about extraterrestrial travel and the way in which extraterrestrials might come here from wherever they are. And, you have to think of the idea that astronomers have that these people are coming from maybe 200 or 300 or more light years away. There is reason to believe, based upon my aunt and uncle's abduction, for example, that these beings might be coming from Zeta Reticuli, which is about 39.4 light years away from us. And so it is much closer. And knowing that these people are coming here are very, very advanced, far more advanced than us, their science must be different. Their science it's reasonable to believe that they have scientific discoveries that look like magic to us. And therefore, a number of theoretical physicists that I talk to have hypothesized about how they actually have traveled through space to come here. And some of it has to do with wormholes, some of it has to do with electromagnetic activity, some of it has to do with the travel through thought.
I think we really don't know because they are alien, and so why they'd be here, we don't know. We're human, and as far as could they get here from there, certainly Christopher Columbus had no idea what a jet engine was, and I think, your friend Stanton Friedman would agree with you on this one, Kathleen.
Yes, in fact, in his book, Flying Saucers in Science, he answers that question quite well.
Yeah, he did. We're going to take another quick commercial break. This is Kate Valentine. I was speaking to Kathleen Marden and Denise Stoner. They are the co-authors of the Marden Stoner study on commonalities among abduction experiencers. We'll be right back, but if you have questions or if you have an experience you'd like to relate, you can post it now on our website, AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. Our guests today are Denise Stoner and Kathleen Marden. They are the co-authors of a critical analysis of the abduction experience, the Marden Stoner study on commonalities among abduction experiencers. If you have a question or a comment, if you'd like to relate an experience, you can post it now or later on our website, AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. And for further information after the show, you can reach Kathleen and Denise on their websites, KathleenMarden.com and Denise M. Stoner. Is that correct, Denise?
Yes.
Okay. Well, just getting back to the emotional responses that you did, what was it? A lot of people felt angry, tired, exhausted, or physically drained and unwell. That seems to be a fairly common thing, too. And to address that, we had a question that came in. They were wondering, Dave was wondering if humans were being abducted for strictly scientific purposes, or do you think there was something more sinister going on? Would that have been the reason for the fear and the exhaustion that followed these abductions? Do you think?
Well, I believe that it is strictly scientific. It seems that way from the reports that I have received. I don't believe that it's sinister. I think that they are attempting to gain a greater understanding about human beings and have an interest in helping us to move ahead on an evolutionary scale. And so I think that is the purpose. What do you think, Denise?
I tend to believe that also, and I believe that if there are some leftover feelings or illnesses, which we also went into, due to the time on the craft, that's just an effect that had on humans. We're also researching that. It has nothing to do with their what was done to them, let's put it that way. It just has to do with how they handled the atmosphere inside the craft.
Well, I think also the lack of control would lead to anger and fear, and that would be pretty understandable to me anyway. And I don't think it was so much sinister as just sort of like a coldness, like just like a sort of examining a lab rat type thing. That is the feeling I get from the stories I've heard about people that have been abducted and taken on alien craft by aliens.
That's true, and there are still, and this perhaps will lead to another study, or a portion of one, where people have come back and they do have repressed memories of something they were told, something they've got inside them that they can't unlock, that they can't bring out. We don't know what that is yet.
Well, then you both go into, as part of your report, as coping mechanisms, and that was interesting, too, that a lot of people had difficulty sleeping, and a lot of them, it seemed that just sort of groups help people, just getting together with other people and sharing that experience. And Denise, I know you have a group. Does that seem to help people?
Yes, it does, and Kathleen and I both share in that. Twice a year, I hold a very private meeting for abductees. They come and they share their feelings in the open within that room. Every bit of information that is shared stays in that room, and they're able to tell their experiences, whatever has happened to them. They can walk out feeling refreshed, and they do. They have experienced something that they've not been able to tell the general public and perhaps even their families. It does make a difference.
Well, and also I think it just brings it back as something real. It wasn't something they just made up or, that they had a little bit of a psychotic episode. It was, it actually did happen. And when other people say, yeah, it happened to me too, I think that brings a great feeling of relief. I would think it would anyway.
Absolutely.
And because you go into, again, physiological responses and the different responses that you have, the actual responses such as blood counts and nosebleeds, and a lot of markers are markers for stress, almost like a cortisone type reaction. and clotting disorders. And here was something very unusual that you found, that they craved excessive amounts of salt. That was a really interesting finding.
It was very interesting to me. That was a question that Denise asked, and I'm going to ask her to speak about that. But I was very, very amazed, because I thought that was just going to bring a fairly negative response, and in fact it was a very statistically significant group of people had that craving for salt. Do you want to address that, Denise?
Sure. Yes, at first, when I discussed it with Kathleen, because I had spoken to so many people and brought that up casually, and they said, oh my gosh, I do that. I don't even taste my food. I just dump the salt on. And I had spoken to enough individuals that I felt this was pertinent to the questionnaire, and I talked to Kathleen, and she said, oh gosh, I don't know if that's important. And we went back and forth a little bit, and I thought, well, maybe Kathleen's right, because she has been so many aspects. But then she decided, well, let's just put it in there and see what happens, and we were both surprised.
Yeah, and it was a very significantly, statistically significant finding, too. And along with that, you found more acute hearing, more sensitive to light, over half people, more allergies, more mood fluctuation. Very interesting. There's really, really physiological changes that these people reported, and migraine suffering, too.
Yes.
Wow. And is there any medical doctor that you ever contacted with that could, I know these are sort of markers for stress, but did you put this physiological responses, did you question any MDs about it or any researchers about it to see what they thought?
I have spoken with medical doctors about this, trying to gain some interest among the medical community, because I think this is important. But I am not aware of any medical doctor who is actually studying this. Are you, Denise?
No, although Kathleen is aware of this, that I had been seeing for quite a long time a neurologist for one particular situation that's ongoing in myself. And he's very interested in this UFO situation and very willing to speak up, and not to the public but to myself. And he is now retired, and he was fascinated with some of the facts that we came up with on this questionnaire, and especially some of the blood work that I had done and people had done, as far as the salt thing for one thing, and some of the illnesses, and said some of it could be due to stress, but some of it there's no reason for, especially the dumping on the salt on your food. It should show up in your blood work, especially if you're prone to that type of thing in the circulatory system. You should be told, don't do that. Look, you have an overabundance. You're going to have some sort of heart disease in the future. Let's back off, et cetera, and it doesn't show up at all.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Kate Valentine, I was speaking to Kathleen Marden and Denise Stoner on 1160 WVNJ. We had a question that came in from Jay. He was wondering, as a result of your research and interviews, if you were given the opportunity, which group of ETs would you choose to visit to learn more, and why? Would you even think that you could visit? And you know, this is the thing I think that bothers me about abductions. It's so one way. I mean, your aunt, Betty Hill, God bless her, actually questioned the ETs and reported on it. I think she's the only one that interviewed them, in a sense. Have you, I don't know if you know which group of ETs you would choose to visit, but have you heard of anyone learning anything from them as to where they come from and what they're here for?
Well, there has been, for example, Eric Wilson. Katerina and Eric Wilson are well-known abduction experiencers, and they did show Eric Wilson a map also of where they were from. This was a star map. And there are some experiencers who have received information from the ETs. And it's almost as if they receive it as a download or as a telepathic message that comes to them very suddenly. They don't communicate with us at the rate of speed, it seems, that we communicate with each other. It seems to be much, much faster. So there have been people who have been receiving some information. And then, of course, there are individuals such as Stan Romanek, who has been working with Dr. Leo Sprinkle and a team of scientists, and under hypnosis, an alleged ET has channeled information through Stan to this scientific team, and the statements that he is making seem to be scientifically valid, even though he doesn't have the education to have that kind of information.
It's very, very fascinating because some of these individuals seem to have this information, as Kathleen said, downloaded so rapidly, it's just suddenly there. And another thing that I could comment on is that some of the abductees I've spoken to are fascinated with certain star clusters in the sky, and they will continuously focus on them as if they either belong there, they're attracted to that area, they want to go there, something like that.
E.T. phone home, huh? Well, that brings us back to psi phenomena, too. That's the other thing that you brought up as part of your paradigm. And it seems that there's been an overwhelming, statistically significant amount of experiences that have witnessed paranormal activity in the home, much more so than the non-abductees.
Yes, and that is correct. That was very surprising to me. I thought it would be a smaller percentage, but and I was interested in knowing if this was the same type of paranormal phenomena that is being observed by people who have not been abducted. So we were able to do a comparison here and discovered that 88% of the abduction experiences reported this kind of occurrence in their homes. And for the most part, it has been light orbs about the size of maybe a baseball that will float through the air or dart through the air and have actually been observed rapidly expanding or even like popping like a bubble into between 1 and 3 extraterrestrial beings. There's also been some poltergeist-type-like activity immediately after an abduction experience. And that is not happening generally from what the input that we have gotten, or the feedback we've received from the non-abduction experiencers. Those who have this kind of activity are reporting more ghost-like activity, apparitions or dark shadows or cold rooms or, that sort of thing. Do you have comments, Denise?
Well, what you said is exactly what we've been observing or hearing. These orbs that are able to pop, that's the only word for it, into entities. And these entities will either stay and observe the individual for a time, float around. They can be seen as a gray type figure. Some of them are blue, that the individuals that I've spoken to, and then they pop back into the orb and disappear, dissipate, float back up into the sky very rapidly. Whether they're going into a craft or just disappearing on their own, that's another study.
Well, at least you have uncovered yet another commonality. Kay Valentine here. I'm speaking to Kathleen Marden and Denise Stoner on 1160 WVNJ. They are the co-authors of the Marden-Stoner study on commonalities among abduction experiencers. We're going to take a short break. We'd like to hear from you, though. If you have questions, comments, or you have had an experience, you can post it now. Our website is AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. Our guests today, Denise Stoner and Kathleen Marden, have written an extremely interesting scientific paper, the Marden-Stoner Study on Commonalities Among Abduction Experiencers. We'd love to hear your comments on that, and you can post them now on our website, AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. But just really quickly to get back to the psi phenomena, Kathleen and Denise, with this telepathic messages, statistically significant, I'm just quoting from your report, 88% reported telepathic communication with the visitors. Why telepathic? Was there, your aunt, Betty Hill, did report actually speaking, but maybe not speaking, but really having a discussion with one of the aliens. Are there any other reports along that? Is it all telepathy? Was there ever any sound? Were they ever speaking the way we would, or is that just, I guess, not possible anyway with the language and all?
Well, let me first clarify your statement about Betty. Mm-hmm. Betty did say that she spoke with them. She felt that she was talking when this happened. But when Dr. Simon asked her if she saw the mouth moving when they communicated, she said no.
Ah, okay.
So it appears to have been telepathic communication that she received as well, even if she was confused about what was actually occurring at that point. And although ETs are sometimes heard making kind of a clicking sound or a humming sound in a sense, I have heard exclusively of telepathic communication. How about you, Denise?
That's very true, yes. And one abductee in particular that I've worked with, both under hypnosis and conscious recall, had said that the mouth was not moving, and he has said he had a terrific amount of download, so much information packed into his brain at once that it disturbed him greatly, and he's had dreams since he was 10 years old of something that was going to occur, and we attempted to unlock that, and the entity's mouth did not move at all.
Well, I guess that makes sense. After all, they are alien, and their experiences on their home planet would certainly be quite different from our experiences on this one. Was there ever any feeling that they had evolved from a more primitive race and that had just evolved themselves into, or whether physically or technologically evolved? Any feeling at all that, our group of beings was at one time where you guys are now? We'd like to help you through the next few stages?
Well, I personally have never discussed that with an abduction experiencer. How about you, Denise?
I haven't discussed that either. That's a very, very good question, and a new one to begin to explore. If you asked me personally, I would have to say that I do believe that they have evolved, and that's what we're in the process of doing.
Yeah, maybe like a big brother type thing trying to help us along. Doug had written in, and he was wondering if there was any connection between the abduction experience and Cushing syndrome. Again, that would be the cortisol stress syndrome. And as you replied earlier, that's still a possibility that maybe someone in the medical field could go into. But there was one other aspect, Denise, that I thought was very interesting, and you were the only one I've ever heard it from, and that's this aspect of invisibility. And you had that very interesting experience in the department store that time.
Of invisibility?
Yeah, remember there was like a person that...
Oh, yes. Kathleen and I have both spoken to a couple of individuals that have felt they were in a particular place at a particular time, and they were not seen for several minutes, several seconds, and thinking, I'm here, I'm right here, I'm walking by you, I'm standing in your group and you don't see me, or standing in a line. Kathleen, you know who I'm speaking of. And
yes.
Yes, that has occurred.
It has, and that was one of the questions that we initially asked on our questionnaire, too. And there was a fairly low percentage of individuals who ever had this feeling, yet there was a small percentage who did.
Yeah, and it almost gives you the feeling that they were in a different dimension, or certainly a different space-time area than we are, like they were traveling through, perhaps. I mean, you just left with that feeling. But at any rate, you do come to a conclusion on your paper, and I liked it. You did find some commonalities, and I was wondering if you'd like to tell our audience about them.
Well, our conclusion was that we found 23 commonalities of the 37 questions that could be analyzed for correlating information. And a pattern emerged indicating that the majority of abduction experiencers had conscious recall of at least one event and were with a witness who also recalled the experience. They had a close encounter with an unconventional craft and sometimes observed its occupants. They were aware of having been examined aboard a craft and were left with perplexing, unexplained marks on their bodies. Slightly more than half had a nosebleed immediately after an experience, and women reported an elevated percentage of gynecological problems that appear to be related to reproductive procedures that they say were performed upon them by alien entities. Also, the vast majority were revisited, some more than 10 times, and taken from their homes to an alien craft. Often the abduction experiencers sensed an impending visitation by alien entities before it occurred, and the mode of communication, as we said, was entirely telepathic. They also developed a new psychic awareness that emerged in the majority of experiencers, and about half have found that they now have new healing abilities as well.
I forgot to bring that up. That was very interesting as well, that they did. I wonder what the connection there is. And, you know, it's an obvious thing, and it does come up again and again in your questionnaires, but that the ability to heal has been enhanced. That's really...
And that's mostly short term. They didn't seem to feel that lasted.
Yeah. Well, I can't believe it, but the hour is almost at an end. And both Denise Stoner and Kathleen Marden, I want to thank you both for being here today. But I want, before we close, to make sure the audience knows how to contact you both and how to get further information. So, Denise, if you could please repeat again your website and your email address.
Yes, website is DeniseMStoner.com. My email is dmstoner1@gmail.com.
And Kathleen, again, if I might trouble you again.
Yes, Kathleen with a K, Kathleen -Marden, MARDEN.com. Also, my website has many, many articles. You can purchase any of my books, autographed copies, there, and also read about my upcoming lectures. And my email address is the letter K, Marden@AOL.com.
You know, I really hope you get a lot of information from this broadcast, and I hope some other people start to contact you. You've made a great head start on investigating this experience. Thank you both very much.
Well, thanks for having us.
Oh, a pleasure.
Thank you.
Really a pleasure. As always, again, a big thank you to both Bill and Dave, and thank you to our sponsors. You can hear this show again Sunday at 4 or on our Still Free podcast, and now on YouTube. We'll see you again next Friday at 1 when our guest will be John Ventry, who will tell us whether or not there will be a show on the 21st. Have a wonderful weekend, and until next week, remember, keep your eye on the sky. Bye.